Fiona. Good morning, everyone. We're here at the Mundaring Incident Control Centre again today. I'll make some comments first before handing over to DFES Commissioner Darren Clem and then Police Commissioner Chris Dawson and Health Minister Roger Cook. The devastation caused by these bushfires is almost too much to comprehend. Many West Australians are hurting right now. We're all thinking of those who've lost their homes, in some cases their livelihoods, or had serious damage to their property. It's devastating. Yesterday afternoon, I was at the Brown Park Evacuation Centre and spoke to people who had lost their homes. They are all very courageous people who are going through so much. All West Australians are thinking of them at this time. We're all with you. We're ready to help in any way that we can. We will get through this together. After a bleak couple of days, this morning we've had some positive news. You've all heard that the Shady Hills estate has been saved. This is a truly remarkable achievement, given the ferocity of the fire, and that as far as we know, no additional homes have been lost overnight, thanks to the incredible work of our fireys. However, the total number of homes lost has now been assessed as 81. I need to stress that the bushfire emergency is not over. The threat to lives and homes remains, and emergency warnings are still in place. These fires are highly unpredictable, and things can go bad very quickly. Weather conditions are still volatile, with strong winds forecast. So please, make sure you continue to follow the emergency advice. We have secured another large aerial tanker to fly to Western Australia, and it has arrived. A second one from the eastern states and a third in total here in WA. I know Western Australians are eager to help out those who've been affected by the fires. If you want to help, a financial donation to the Lord Mayor's Distress Relief Fund is the best way to directly assist. The state government has donated $2 million to the fund. Please visit www.appealswa.org.au for more information. Today I can also announce that the state government will provide emergency funding of $4,000 to those whose homes have been destroyed by the fires. $2,000 will be made available to those whose homes have been damaged. This is additional assistance over and above the Commonwealth Government's emergency relief arrangements. We'll provide further information on how people can access these payments as soon as possible. The Department of Communities has also set up a disaster response hotline. If you've been affected by the bushfires, welfare support assistance may be available to you. Please contact the disaster response hotline on 1800 032 965. To keep up to date on the bushfires, please visit the emergency website, or follow DFES on Facebook and Twitter and continue to listen to local news bulletins. The DFES Commissioner will provide a more detailed update in a moment. Now, on to COVID and the current lockdown. I can report that after 3 full days of lockdown, Western Australia has recorded no new local cases from the test results received. That's 0 new local cases, an amazing result. There are 2 new overseas cases, both in hotel quarantine. Today's result takes us to 4 days in a row of 0 local cases. This is a remarkable achievement. I think it's a result that is full credit to every person currently in lockdown and getting tested. It's a result that was only achieved because West Australians were willing to do what was needed to be done to keep our state safe. At this stage of the lockdown, this is the news we were hoping for. Western Australia is in a strong position. We know that things can change in an instant and we need to stay the course, but we can cautiously start to look ahead to the future, knowing that if we continue down this path, the end to lockdown is in sight. Our expert teams are working through what post-lockdown life will look like in the Perth, Peel and Southwest. I will be convening a meeting of the State Disaster Council for later today to discuss this further, so we have a detailed plan in place beyond 6 p.m. on Friday night. While the numbers have been very encouraging, I have another ask of Western Australians. I need you to get tested. Yesterday, we recorded a total of 7,767 tests. Naturally, the number has trended down. So please keep getting tested. Even if you have had a negative result, if you develop any symptoms, go get tested again. It is just so important. In total, 191 close contacts of the confirmed case have now been identified. 156 of these have returned negative results. In addition, 258 casual contacts have also been identified. 200 of these have returned negative results. We are currently awaiting further results. The 4 high-risk close contacts of case 903 have been retested and returned their second negative test results late yesterday. This is good news, and they all remain in hotel quarantine. All close and casual contacts of the confirmed case will be tested again from today. WA Health continues to follow up all contacts to ensure they have been tested. Our contact tracing team has done an outstanding job. They have swung into action after nearly 10 months of no COVID and are playing a big role in crushing the virus. I'd like to thank them for their tireless work over the past few days. Together with Safe WA, they have been an incredible asset to the state. Given the evolving situation in Victoria, we have now made a decision to pause our planned border control transition with Victoria for now. Victoria was due to move to the very low risk category from midnight tonight, but that has now been put on hold and we will assess the situation over coming days. This means travellers from Victoria will still need to self-quarantine for 14 days and undergo a day 11 test. It is possible that Victoria may need to go back to the medium risk category, but hopefully the situation there will remain under control. I acknowledge this will cause inconvenience and frustration for many people, but we are in a high risk situation and we need to be cautious. Can I wish everyone in Victoria well as they manage this emerging situation? As I've said, if WA records another day of 0 new cases tomorrow, we can expect to begin the easing of restrictions from 6 p.m. tomorrow night. Until then, please continue to observe the lockdown rules. Don't get complacent. And remember, police will continue to have the power to issue fines to those who don't do the right thing. Let's keep it going for just one more day. But I need to stress, it will be a little longer before things go back to the way we've become used to. During the past 10 months, when WA has been COVID-free, more than ever, it's important that everyone downloads the Safe WA app. We've seen over the past week just how vital this is in preventing an outbreak if we ever record another case. Since the app was launched, we've had nearly 1.5 million individual registrations, over 50,000 business registrations. Since contact registers became mandatory, we've had nearly 30 million scans. It's great to see, and we need that to continue from now on, especially when we come out of full lockdown. If we are in a position to ease restrictions, Safe WA will become even more crucial. It needs to be used every single time. It needs to be the new normal. I'd like to again thank the people of this state for the sacrifices they've made this week and their willingness to cooperate to keep our state safe. As I said yesterday, we are showing what can be done if we all work together. Let's keep it up for just a little longer. I'll now hand over to the DPS Commissioner, Darren Clem.
Thanks, Premier. Yesterday afternoon, I briefed you all on the conditions that firefighters were going to be faced with last night and the work that had gone underway yesterday afternoon to prepare us for the potential for the fire to impact Shady Hills Estate overnight. I can happily say that the strategies that were put in place using large air tankers, 2 extensive retardant lines were laid to the southern part of Shady Hills Estate, and what occurred last night was the fire extended across the river to the north and ran into those retardant lines and was halted by those retardant lines that were put in last night. And it's just a great example of the strategies that the incident management team put in together to make sure that that estate was kept safe overnight. Today, before I go to that, we also had some breakouts around Avon Ridge last night, and that's an indicator of some of the difficult winds that the crews experienced. We had winds that were blowing from the southeast direction, and we also had winds that were blowing from the northeast direction. Those northeast winds caused the fire to extend into Avon Ridge, and properties were protected in there last night. We also had the fire extend on the northern flank, on the southern side of the river, but east of Shady Hills Estate. It's that particular area now that's causing us some problems as we stand here today, compounded by the strength of the winds that we've got here today has meant that the wind shear off the Scarp, as our fixed-wing water bombers are unable to fly currently due to the strength of the winds, and they're currently on the ground. We're using the 3 large air tankers currently to put retardant lines in ahead of that northern flank. No loss of homes overnight was a great outcome, and it is credit to the strategies that were put in place by the incident management team and backed up by the firefighters on the ground in incredibly difficult conditions overnight. Today we've got over 260 firefighters on the fire ground. All of the aircraft are in use currently except for the fixed-wing water bombers due to the wind shear. I can advise you that DFS is currently planning to bring crews in from interstate, both on-the-ground fire crews and incident management team personnel should we need them. That planning is in an advanced stage to make sure that we can work through any COVID or quarantine requirements that might be required. We haven't pulled the trigger on requiring those extra resources yet, but we will be in a position today to be able to pull that trigger should it be required. I'd like to thank the community. I visited the evacuation centre at Brown Road this morning. Thank the community, spoke to a number of people there and the difficulties they faced. I can confirm, as the Premier's already said, the loss of homes now stands at 81, and our thoughts are with all of those people who've lost their homes in this event. The notification to those people began yesterday afternoon. Now, everybody within the Shire of Mundaring whose home has been lost, those notifications have been completed, and late yesterday and into today we're working through with the local governments of Mundaring and Swan to provide that notification to the people that are in Swan, the city of Swan. We're looking to provide access to the fire ground east of 2J Road, and so work is underway. Western Power have already started in there this morning, working to replace poles and power operating again in there on the roads, and that work was undertaken last night and again this morning, and we'll be looking to escort some of those homeowners, people who have lost their homes, through that particular location later on this afternoon. Thank you.
We're on day 4 of a lockdown. We have a bushfire that is continuing to burn, and this is a time for the community to listen to the emergency warnings and take required actions. This is not a time to let our guards down. For those of you that are in lockdown in the Perth, Peel and southwest regions, keep wearing your mask, keep doing what you have been doing for the last 4 days. The community is coming with us on this, and you're being very willing to help us protect you and the entire community. In regards to the bushfire zone, I won't repeat what the Premier and Commissioner Clem stated there, but I'd reinforce a couple of things. There have been some reports of vehicle checkpoints being moved. That has occurred overnight in Mouchet and Chittering. They were closed for safety reasons temporarily. The police patrols and others were maintaining patrols of the area, but we did that based on the emergency advice given, and they've been reinstated this morning. That is a normal situation in a moving fire front. I reinforce to my regret and sincere thoughts for all those people who have lost their homes. I know some of my police officers have also had their properties affected. We will continue to support and actively patrol. In respect of reports of looting, there are no reports that I would characterise as looting. There have been no further burglaries reported to me. The 2 burglaries that I reported yesterday at Averley and at Red Hill are the only 2 reports I've received, and no further overnight, other than some suspicious movement of people, which we have not validated as criminal movement, but we will continue to patrol and continue to respond to any requests, but no reports of theft or burglary overnight. So I wouldn't categorise this or characterise it as looting. In respect to the fire investigation as to the point of origin up near Wirraloo, again, that has been determined at the seat of where this started, but we have not yet established any criminal behaviour at that point. That's not to say that we don't want the community to come forward with any information. If you have any information, well, of course, police will work with DFIS on this matter, but at this point in time, there is no evidence or brief to me that this has been caused by criminal behaviour, and we will continue to work with fire and emergency services to establish the cause of the seat of the fire. An update in respect to the case 903 investigation that I've briefed you previously about. There is really nothing of substance that I can add to what I briefed you yesterday. Case 903, this man continues to work very closely with the Department of Health contact trace team and with the police, who in fact have spoken to him again for the 2nd time. He continues to be cooperative. There's nothing in his movements that we have found that is contrary to what he's previously provided, and there's nothing further that I really have to add to that. There have been several people across the community who we have infringed for not wearing their masks. They fall into that category where they have been offered, etc., and they're being belligerent and willfully non-compliant. They've copped a couple of infringements here and there, but I once again thank the community for cooperating and wearing your masks. That will continue. The assessment, as the Premier has already outlined, is for those people that are travelling from or through Victoria. There is no change to that particular situation being contemplated at the moment until we get further health advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just a cover off on a couple of areas. First, to testing. I want to stress the importance, as the Premier did, of keeping our testing numbers up. If you're unwell, if you're a member of the community that from any of the exposure sites, please take the opportunity to get yourself tested. I'm very pleased that we have done more than 37,000 tests in the last 3 days, including 17,522 tests on Monday alone. That's an outstanding result, and at this point, can I just acknowledge the excellent work being done by our hard-working staff at Pathwest, but also our partners in the private pathology industry. They are processing thousands of tests very quickly, and as you can see, we've got some pleasing results. At the same time, our contact tracing teams have undertaken an extraordinary work to identify close and casual contacts of case 903. Their fast and efficient work had allowed us to identify and test the highest risk people and the wider circle of casual contacts. That total number is now 450. So that also is very pleasing. I want to thank all the members of our contact tracing teams. But can I just once again stress that we have to keep our testing rates up. This is a vital early warning system to detect and any potential cases in the community. This disease can take up to 14 days to incubate. So we're not out of the woods yet, but I join you all in being encouraged by these early results. If you have any symptoms, if you're a member of the community from any of those exposure sites, even if you've already been tested and you're feeling unwell, please get yourself tested once again. Just in relation to the hotels, and as Victoria has shown overnight, the situation with the new strains of COVID-19 is changing very quickly. Every state is reassessing their processes, and I know that there's a meeting of the AHPPC this morning to address these issues. As part of our continuous improvement process, today all hotel quarantine workers in high-risk areas, in addition to obviously wearing masks, will also be required to have eye protection equipment. Other measures that we're looking to introduce shortly is to have hotel quarantine workers have a saliva test between shifts. This is a proposal put up by the Victorian government. We agree with it, and we're awaiting AHPPC advice in terms of implementing that program, but we're looking to make it as part of the changes that we're looking to implement next week with regards to secondary jobs for quarantine workers. So we're continuing to act, and at the same time, with these changes, we're also nearing the end of the first part of our review of hotel quarantining arrangements by Dr. Taryn Weeramanthri, which will be delivered in the coming days. It's worth noting at this point that Dr. Weeramanthri is a fiercely independent and extremely well-credentialed consultant. He is an internationally renowned public health expert who has worked in many places around the world, including Africa at the height of the Ebola crisis. He also led the team that resolved the water crisis at Perth Children's Hospital and is a former Chief Health Officer from Northern Territory and Western Australia, of course. The Victorian government flew him to Melbourne to act as a special advisor during their recent and extensive outbreak. So we're very much looking forward to the insights that Dr. Weeramanthri will provide for us. With regards to the case 903, we have retested the 4 high-risk close contacts, which includes the 3 flatmates with respect to case 903. All have returned a second negative test result late yesterday. Now, as the Premier reported, all close and casual contacts will be tested again today, and we'll have those results either later today or tomorrow to provide extra reassurance, in addition to, of course, their day 12 testing as part of their 14 days home isolation. I just want to conclude by saying the numbers that we're getting around the Safe WA app have been outstanding. And we're at day 4 of the lockdown, so I appreciate some households will now be needing to restock their pantries or their medicine cabinets. So I just remind you, when you go back to the shops today, things would have changed. Since you last went there, we now have the Safe WA app requirements on all our shopping centres, supermarkets, chemists and so forth. So you will need to make sure that you check in. And this is a really important part of the process. As you know, we've had almost 30 million scans by people using the Safe WA app. That's incredibly important information. It's information which is turned into instant data for our contact tracing teams and is vital in terms of continuing to do some great work to put down, to stamp out and crush any evidence of the disease in our community. Before going to questions and answers, obviously on the COVID situation, just invite Commissioner Clem back to the lectern for any questions you might have in relation to the bushfires.
Thanks, Minister.
People seem to be getting a bit frustrated about when they can get back to their properties. What do you say to them?
So, as I mentioned earlier, we're working on the east side of 2J Road to get that opened up today. That may be opened up for restricted access permits, and we have a restricted access permit team that was established yesterday in advance of that. But there is also the chance that the whole fire area on the east side of 2J Road will be given full access to the community, but there will be advice about that later on this afternoon. What's important though is there are a number of risks that exist after a fire goes through, and it's important that we go through, make sure that the trees that are in danger of falling are felled by chainsaw operators and made safe so that we don't have any injuries in the affected area when the community return.
Can you tell us about these 2 extra air tankers from over east and what they mean specifically for today, today's firefight and the longer term?
So as we've seen last night, the laying of those 2 retardant lines were absolutely critical to the protection of Shady Hills Estate. And when we're operating in this sort of terrain where it's really difficult for us to get fire trucks into certain locations, you know, as an example, today fire crews are using Racos to put a break from the top of the hill at Shady Hills Estate down to the river. And now what that tells you is that we cannot get earth-moving equipment into that location because of the steepness of the terrain. And so these retardant lines are absolutely critical, and the length of them, some 400 to 500 metres every drop from a large air tanker, allows us to build long and robust retardant lines ahead of the fire. And it's absolutely critical for us on the northern flank of the fire where the terrain is particularly steep and difficult to get to.
Were you surprised by the effectiveness of the retardant last night? Were you preparing for a lot worse?
I think you know, we're really confident in the strategy, no doubt, but as we experienced on Monday night with the significant fire behaviour that we had, that there is always the chance that the fire gets ahead of steam up, and particularly coming out of that valley and heading in up the hill. The fire always runs faster up the hill. It can be difficult to stop. You know, we were confident in the retardant lines that we laid, but we had, you know, over 27 fire trucks inside Shady Hills Estate last night to make sure that just from the Amber attack alone that no properties were affected.
I understand they're based in Busselton. Can you tell us why they're based in Busselton?
Yeah, so last year during the Yanchep fires, we brought a large air tanker from the eastern states and based it out of Pearce for that particular fire. We're unable to base the LATs at Pearce Air Base this year because they're working on their runway. So essentially the runway's unavailable, and so we can't operate out of Pearce. We don't normally operate out of Perth Airport and haven't done so for some period of time, and that is because when we want to take off, we want to take off, and when we want to land, we want to land. And that's extremely difficult for us at Perth Airport with the amount of, you know, commercial aviation that operates out of there. In addition to that, the retardant mixing capability needs to be established as well. We're constantly mixing up to 25,000 litres of retardant to be able to fill the planes as soon as they land with 15,000 litres each time. So that infrastructure that sits around that takes up some space, and we need people to be able to move around that. In addition, the location of Busselton for the southwest of the state is a great location. It places it really centrally for fires may occur in that, you know, really bushfire southwest portion of the state. Bushfire prone, sorry.
So in terms of that flexibility, I mean, does it need to be more flexible, be closer, or is the distance negligible between Busselton and here?
Oh, look, it's longer. I think, you know, you definitely could say that. Would it be great if we could operate out of Pearce? Yes, it would. If Pearce was available today, would we be operating out of it? Yes, we would. We would, you know, re-establish our retardant mixing capability at Pearce and operate out of Pearce. But it's just, you know, one of those things that they've decided to do some work on the runway.
Are you concerned about the strong gusts of wind, like causing the fixed wing aircraft unable to fly at the moment and help and assist?
So this is not something that hasn't happened before. We experienced this during the Red Hill fires back in the late 2000s, the same experience, and they're a very light aircraft, and so that wind shear off the scarp really affects them. We'll just keep monitoring that, and as soon as we're able to get them back in the air, we will.
Well, is that the main concern though, the powerful gusts of wind?
Yes.
And how quickly it can change?
Yes, absolutely. We've got hopefully a reasonably set southeasterly direction in the wind. It will be affected by the valleys that exist through the Avon Valley there, which caused us some issues last night with funneling of the winds into different directions, and was one of the key drivers around the breakout we had around Avon Ridge. So we'll keep monitoring that. Everybody can see outside how strong the wind is, and that's the challenge for today, tonight and tomorrow. And I just want to make the point that there's still some ways to go with this fire. We've had a really good night last night, and you should be really confident about the work that went in last night to keep that estate safe. But we've still got challenges today, tonight and tomorrow. Forecast rain for Saturday and Sunday. You know, I'd like to get a little bit closer to the weekend to be more confident about the quantum of that rain. 5 millimetres won't necessarily do much for us, but 20 or 30 millimetres over those 2 days would be fantastic.
WA had only just acquired one of these large air tankers. You know, such a big state, such a critical asset. Should we have more? Like, having 2 to deploy, you know, as soon as a fire starts would obviously help crews on the ground.
Yeah, so we've accessed large air tankers from the eastern states before. Clearly, you know, a different fire season in the eastern states this year than last year, and we've been able to access additional large air tankers. But they're not for every occasion, and I think that's an important point to make. Last year, for example, we brought the large air tanker over for the Yanchep fire, and we didn't end up using it at Yanchep, we used it down at Collie. And so there are certain circumstances where they absolutely fit the bill, and in this fire here, where access for on-the-ground crews is so difficult, access for earth-moving equipment is so difficult in particular parts, the laying of retardant lines is really, really effective, and that's where your large air tankers really come into their own. And additionally, as we've seen today, with the fixed wing having to sit down because of the wind shear off the scarp, those large air tankers are a heavier plane and they're able to operate in those conditions.
Could more homes have been saved if there was more than one air tanker based here in WA?
Look, it's speculative to say that. The fire that commenced at 12 o'clock on Monday was an extremely fast-moving fire in a rural-urban interface area, and firefighters were moving, you know, from one house to the next to try and save property in a very dynamic environment. And you know, one large air tanker, 10 large air tankers, I'm not certain that the outcome would have been any different. We certainly had helicopters and fixed-wing water bombers at that very quickly. We have, for the whole of the Darling Scarp, we have automatic response for aircraft to fires that are reported in those areas.
Is there any update on any injured firefighters or how they're going?
I reported yesterday that we had 6 firefighters with minor injuries. Overnight, a firefighter has fallen over on the fire ground and I believe broken a hip. I don't know the exact circumstances about how that happened, but you can imagine you know, difficult conditions and steep and hilly terrain, and so he's in hospital, and I'll speak to him later on this afternoon.
Have the border closures with New South Wales and Victoria created any difficulty of flying firefighters from those states?
No, they're still working through those challenges, and that's why we've commenced that planning to make sure that, you know, should we need to pull the trigger on it, all of those little issues around which state we may get those people from have been sorted out. We did, as an example, with the large air tanker, the second one that we got, it was originally we were going to get one out of Victoria, and we ended up getting it from New South Wales because of some COVID issues. So there are a number spread around the eastern states that we can pull from, and you know, good planning in relation to moving the human resource across borders is occurring right now.
I've also heard examples of volleys who have travelled from outside of Perth, the non-lockdown regions. They've fought the fire here, and they've been told when they return, for example, to the Midwest, they'll have to wear masks. Is that the case?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the exemptions that exist for you know, emergencies, that exactly what we're dealing with here, are in place to allow us to move crews across those borders as required, and we've done that. There's crews from Albany I saw here yesterday that have come up.
Chosen to stay and defend, obviously having to get more supplies and not being allowed out. It's obviously an issue that happens every fire, but is there anything that can be put in place to allow those people that are helping crews on the ground as well, putting out spot fires and stuff? Is there anything that can be done to help them get in and out?
Yeah, look, a matter around fuel was raised with me this morning, the availability of fuel for a person in Bullsbrook, and I assume that's the issue that you're talking about. That's been raised with the incident management team. So if there are people out there that have stayed and they're very well prepared, they have the equipment that they need, they have the protective, you know, clothing that they require, and they need additional supplies, and in this case fuel, then they should contact the incident management team, and we can make sure we get out fuel to those roadblocks. Alternatively, they can contact friends and family, and they can bring that fuel at that point. Right, thank you.
The issue in Victoria and of course the issue here a few days ago, is it now time to look at alternative quarantining return travellers outside of an inner city setting?
Look, obviously, I think what's gone on in Victoria really just underscores how much of a challenge the new strains are of the disease in terms of hotel quarantining. And we'll be looking for AHPPC advice in terms of establishing some national standards or a refresh in terms of the review of those processes. You've seen now not only this has caused an outbreak potentially in New South Wales, although we never actually found the cause of their outbreak. It's certainly the cause of the outbreak in Queensland. It's the cause of the outbreak in South Australia. We're no orphans in that, and now you see the situation in Victoria. So I think that means that we really do need to get some new public health advice to really just make sure that we nail down this one.
Do you still have faith in hotel quarantine?
I'll just take Jacob's if that's right.
Do you still have faith in hotel quarantine as a concept?
Look, I do. I think it's worked very well. Look, and I'd also just like to draw people's attention to the fact that we've had so few international arrivals coming with the disease since we required the pre-flight tests before coming to Australia. So today's two international travellers, one was in a flight crew who was picked up at airport testing. The other was a young person travelling with their family who was picked up on day 12. But what we're not seeing now is those numbers of international arrivals that are being picked up on day 2 of their tests. So I think what you're going to see is a significant downward pressure in terms of the number of international arrivals coming with COVID-19 now. That will provide us with another opportunity to just review the processes, the procedures, and put in place those things that we think are necessary to mitigate the risk. Vicky.
Thank you. National Cabinet, will you be asking them about, again, about the use of Christmas Island or defence bases for quarantine? You know, what do you hope to see out of the National Cabinet? And the other thing is, how much merit in the AMA suggestion that some of these travellers have actually contracted the virus inside the hotels?
Well, clearly that was the case in the situation with regards to the Victorian. You'll recall there's 2 Victorian incidences, one transmission of the disease between one hotel room and another. The other is the transmission of the disease from a hotel guest to a quarantine worker. So obviously, you know, all these things give rise to review of people's processes and procedures, and we'll continue to make sure that we can work with other jurisdictions to build learnings from this. What goes on at National Cabinet, of course, is the role of the Premier to communicate, and I'll leave that question to him. Although I would just say that he's drawn to the community's attention on a number of occasions that quarantining with regards to international borders is a Commonwealth responsibility.
Have you, given the controversy around now the hotel security worker and not necessarily required to wear a mask, have you checked the protocols for other people working in that hotel quarantine environment?
In that particular hotel?
In any hotel?
Yes, absolutely. Obviously, as part of our continuous improvement process, we continue to learn about how we can better adapt and make sure that our processes and procedures, all our protocols, are working to reduce the risk of any spread of the disease.
So would you be surprised to know that cleaners in all the hotels were not required to wear PPE?
So if I can just finish
Did you know that, Minister? Did you know that cleaners were not required to wear PPE when entering the rooms of people that have been in there to clean their rooms?
So we'll continue to learn in relation to the processes and make sure that we put measures in place to ensure that people aren't put at risk. Now, in relation,
I'm asking a specific question.
So Gary,
were you aware that cleaners were not wearing PPE when entering to clean the rooms of people that have been in there?
Gary, I know the camera's on you at the moment, but if you may, just let me finish my answer. Well, yes, I do. And if you would just let me answer the question. Well, in Western Australia, what we do when a hotel guest leaves a room, that room is left fallow for 3 days to make sure that there's no risk of the disease being present. Now, if you have other questions in relation to the operational aspects of the hotel quarantine, I've got the Director General of Health here who'll be able to answer those questions.
Victoria didn't lock down when it had one case in very similar circumstances to WA. Did we overeat the situation by going straight into lockdown?
Well, as the Premier says, we take a cautious approach. And already in Victoria, they already had a number of measures in place, which are not dissimilar to the measures that we currently have in place. But we took the appropriate actions consistent with the public health risk as advised by the public health experts.
Sorry, is Gary correct that cleaners after that 3-day fallow period are going in there without masks?
Well, I'll invite the Director General just to confirm that in a jiffy.
How critical is today to knowing that we've got this knocked on the head? How many tests need to be completed given incubation and lag?
Well, look, I think today is critical. There is a huge boost of confidence. As the Premier and I have stressed, we're not out of the woods. There is, in some circumstances, there is cases where you see the incubation period lasting longer, but we are now really getting some good data which suggests that we should grow in our confidence with respect to the outbreak. We will test those close contacts and casual contacts again today, just as an extra, provide us with extra confidence in relation to this. And obviously the full 14-day period since that outbreak was detected is another crucial date in terms of understanding to the extent to which we've crushed this particular outbreak. But today is a real confidence boost, in particular the fact that the flatmates have been tested again and they've come back with a negative result. But we'll test them again today.
Presumably you've ruled out, have you, the possibility of false positives or some kind of testing mix-up, because there seems to still be such mystery surrounding this gentleman 903.
Yes, we are. Look, false positives tend to come from the more rapid testing techniques that we have. All these tests have been based on the PCR test, which is highly accurate. Sorry, Rory, did you have another question?
Do you know anything about claims that the guard had a girlfriend staying in the hotel and that she'd returned from the UK?
No.
Have you heard anything about that?
No. I've heard a lot of things over the last few days, particularly through social media, some of it wild, some of it ridiculous, but that's a good one.
Just on the rules coming out of lockdown, has there been any decision or any thought about how involved masks will continue to be in daily laws and potentially open at 6 p.m. on Friday, but they won't know until a few hours beforehand how they can open?
Well, I think the Premier foreshadowed yesterday that masks obviously have a continuing role to play, but in particular, he outlined that the State Disaster Council will meet at 3 p.m. today, consider the advice from the Chief Health Officer and make some decisions from there.
Is it difficult for businesses though, given they will only have a few hours to plan?
We'll try to provide them with as much notice as possible. I know this is difficult, and we apologise for the fact that this is incredibly disruptive, but it's the reason for that, and that is we want to keep people safe. And we'll provide people with as much certainty and with as much notice as we can about the future. But this is COVID-19. These are uncertain times and they are difficult circumstances.
Are pregnant women being told to wear masks during childbirth, do you know?
I'll invite the Director General to make a comment on that.
The Queensland Government today said that a man who completed quarantine in Perth and subsequently travelled to Townsville is now tested positive for COVID. They don't seem to think there's a public health risk. Have you been briefed on the circumstances? I
haven't, but can I just draw this similarity with the recent case that we had, the case 904, where that person returned from international travel, quarantined in New South Wales, came to Western Australia and produced a positive result. Now, we were able to confirm through subsequent testing that he was simply displaying fragments of the disease as he shed that disease, but these things happen from time to time, but we'll check that one out.
Has the COVID wastewater testing program been extended beyond last month?
Oh yes, it's continuing, yes. We would certainly let you know if there was any positives outside the Subiaco wastewater treatment plant.
Because it was due to finish last month, but that report been made to extend it as a result of this lockdown?
Well, it's being extended anyway. This will be a continuous part of our ongoing vigilance against the disease.
And have we no results of a detrimental kind?
No, as I said, we always get positive results in the Subiaco wastewater treatment samples, but you'd expect that because that's the one which takes wastewater from the hotels, Gary. Questions for the Director General?
Yeah, just on the cleaning protocol.
Yep.
For example, cleaning, I said other roles of other people in
Yep.
hotels. What's your knowledge of the cleaning protocols for people?
Well, as the Minister said, Gary, there are, we do leave the rooms fallow for 3 days, and that means untouched. So we don't risk, one, because we've got enough rooms, and also we don't want to risk any of the cleaners. Now, we have not had a positive in a cleaner since we've run the hotel system. So over 37,000 people have been through the hotel system. Obviously, it was disappointing to get this one positive test from the hotel security guard, but we're very cautious. What I can guarantee is those cleaners, if they do need to go into high-risk areas, they will be wearing the full PPE or the appropriate PPE. When we looked at those people who basically dropped stuff off at the door of the hotel room guest, we can find no breach of PPE rules. So they were actually all following the PPE rules there, and the guard was following the PPE rules that were in place at the time. And as the Commissioner of Police has said, he has been nothing but cooperative in the way that he's dealt with our public health team and with the police team.
So you're saying that the cleaners going in after 3 days?
Yeah.
When was the 3 day introduced?
That's been there for a while. That has been there for as long as I can remember. Can I also say, if we believe the public health team clear every positive case, so if there's a positive, and you often think about a day 12 test, so if somebody's got a positive day 12 test, they tend to then stay in a little bit longer. If the public health team are concerned about any passenger who is a positive case and they just feel they're not well enough, they've got symptoms, they might have returned a negative test, or that they continue to maybe return a slightly weaker positive result, they'll keep them in longer. So we are always over cautious about this. It's not just a finite 14 days from when you're in, or finite days. I mean, if you test positive at day 12, you may end up spending an extra 14 days in hotel quarantine.
Is the hotel guest who infected this guard still in the same room in quarantine?
As I understand it, the hotel guest has been discharged, so has been cleared and discharged. As I think the Premier announced, we're not taking any other guests into that hotel at the moment. We tested everybody in that hotel on a couple of days ago, and everybody who was tested was negative. There were 54 hotel guests who I think left on the next day. They were inconvenienced. I'm sorry about that for a day, but they were all negative.
So there's a feeling of uncertainty around how it was transmitted. I mean, once you sort of realised, was that whole floor evacuated?
No, not necessarily. I don't know that, but I don't think evacuated. But they were. You leave a room fallow. We certainly haven't put another person in that room, and it's important to know that we're constantly learning. And I think you've seen what's out of Victoria. So as the Minister has said, we do need consistent advice nationally, because the states do things a little bit differently. And I think with the new transmissibility or the new strains of the virus and the transmissibility of those viruses, we do need consistent advice from HPPC and their subcommittees, which have infectious diseases specialists on there, about how we control the virus better going forward.
Could you just sum up your view or opinion on this aerial transmission?
Yeah. I think I think we're beginning to learn more about how this can be transmitted, and certainly when we have looked at the proximity of the guard to the door, he was sitting the right distance from the door. But there were 7 people who went in. So there is, the working hypothesis from the public health physicians is very much it's airflow from that door that fell over that guard. Now, we have interviewed him. He has not done the wrong thing. He had a mask on him to put on. Should that guest have come out, they're told to step away and say, please go back in your room. That's what would have happened. There was no breach here. And if I can reiterate, We do want to hear about breaches. We do not want breaches to go underground. So if there's something, we do encourage cleaners, security guards, hotel workers, our own staff to say, if you see something, say something, because we want to learn from that. And, you know, we've had 37,000 people through our hotels. And we...
He's now since been tested and cleared of COVID-19, the security guard.
No. He hasn't been. He's in one of our chic hotels, and he obviously we haven't, I don't think, done another test on him because he was positive. You do another test and then you might do a day 12 test. But as the Premier said, we've tested his 3 close contacts and his friend. They're all negative, and all the close contacts will be tested again. And can I put a big thank you to the wonderful contact tracing team, the testers who've done a magnificent job, and also those people working at hotels.
You said wasn't a breach in this situation. Given the air transmissibility of this and the fact that there was no breach, I mean, does that mean that the whole quarantine system needs to be overhauled?
Well, no, because I think that's a gut reaction to, we have had, incidents, 37,000, and then you talk about Christmas Island, or you talk about putting patients in rural areas. Where they're going to get the medical help from? What if somebody gets really sick? There's a real positive about having people in hotels that are close to the city because they're close to medical help. And some people are very sick with COVID, as you've well seen.
But does that not mean that we could see an increased likelihood of transmission between people who are in rooms and guards?
Well, and that's why we've strengthened, we've sought advice, we've strengthened those wearing of masks and eyewear. And I'm seeking, and as the Premier said, I would love to see, as somebody who runs a health department, national consistent advice about what is the best protection for people working in our hotels. And that can always be adapted, and that should be national.
Do you think we can expect to see an increase in infections as a result of this?
Well, I think you're seeing the odd case, and the ones, you've seen the one in Victoria, you've seen the one here. I haven't got a crystal ball. What we're trying to do is reduce that, and reduce that significantly. And as I say, some of the higher transmissible cases we tend to keep in hotel quarantine a little bit longer.
So as Director General, am I correct that you aren't in favour of the use of distant locations such as Christmas Island?
Well, I'm not saying I'm not in favour, but what I'm saying is there needs to be, if you're going to do Christmas Island, you need to have good medical care there. But I think the quarantine, the facilities there are excellent. So it's very possible they may work very well, but you'd have to have the medical facilities on site to make sure the patients were looked after. I wouldn't like to see patients move to a rural or regional area in WA where it's a long way to get to medical help.
Is there a suitable hospital on Christmas Island?
Well, they have got a good hospital there. It's obviously limited because it's a rural hospital, but we've got a system at the moment that we need to continually improve.
Well, they did it at Christmas Island with OSMAT teams. Can't that be done again?
I'm sure it could. OSMAT teams are really good. We've had them here as well.
Premier?
I just have one more on PPE.
Yep.
Are you confident in the protocols when taking off PPE in hotels, in particular for junior nurses who may have just come out of uni?
We are constantly auditing. We audit regularly. The Infection Prevention Control Team audit regularly the practices in our hotels. I was with our Chief Infection Prevention Control nurse yesterday. She was saying that their teams were in a different hotel every day last week and the same this week. So people get taught and they actually get watched to see what they're doing. Whether they're a junior nurse or a security guard or a cleaner or whoever needs to be taught how to use PPE, we would want to make sure they do it the best way. But I'm confident of the training.
Premier, Victoria's obviously got one infected security guard. They have not put Melbourne into lockdown. You did put Perth into lockdown in a similar situation. What's the difference?
It's a good question. Victoria is a very different situation. They've already had rules in place that have been in place for a long period of time, which are much, much stronger the restrictions than Western Australia had in place. So up until now, they've had a 50% capacity in the workplace rule in place. They've had masks in many settings across the community, and they had a 30-person limit at home. So what they've done is have rules in place for months and months and months. Now they've just upgraded our rules. Obviously, Western Australia, we were in a position with no COVID for 10 months So therefore our freedoms were much greater, and therefore our vulnerability was much greater. As we said the whole way along, the Chief Health Officer said it many times, the Health Minister said it many times, we were more vulnerable than anywhere else, simply because we were freer, more relaxed, more open community, and we hadn't had any COVID for 10 months, which was virtually a world record. So therefore we had to take sterner action more immediately. But I just repeat, Victoria is not out of the woods yet. They may still well go into more severe measures, but they already had measures in place that Western Australia didn't have.
So given that, do you think that WA, you'll have to impose a certain level of restrictions on people in WA similar to what you just described in Victoria? So next time we have a case in hotel quarantine, you won't have to impose a week-long lockdown?
Well, obviously we deal with each case on its merits, but just so you know about this case, this person has the UK strain, and obviously when we were advised on Sunday, we knew that he had been out, if you like, or had the illness for a number of days, and he'd also travelled around a fair bit. So it was a pretty scary situation we had to deal with. So each case is dealt with on its merits. Another case might be someone who we identify them the same day and they put into quarantine immediately. It might be a very different circumstance. Look, we've taken a very cautious, a very precautionary approach because we don't want to see the spread of the virus in Western Australia. We don't want to see it come here. So I know that's been very difficult for people. But as I keep saying, have a look around the world. We are in a very different position to most places around the world, hopefully, and we'll either make an announcement later tonight or tomorrow morning about what will happen at Friday at 6 p.m. But hopefully we can relax the restrictions tomorrow night so we can get back to a more normal situation.
So my question is it safe for WA to go back as it was a week ago, or are you going to have to keep some suppression restrictions on for the long term?
Well, it's not the entirety of WA, it's Perth Hills and the southwest. And as I said, I think yesterday and the day before, we will, in response to one of your questions actually, Peter, we will step down. So there will be continuing restrictions in place after this lockdown ends. That's the normal practice in every single state around Australia when lockdowns end.
Does that include hospitality in terms of, because I know the AHA has come out today and said, you know, it's all well and good, but at 6 o'clock, when they could be expected to open their doors, they may not be ready for that. What would you say to them?
Well, we want to make an announcement in relation to what the restrictions, the ongoing restrictions will be as soon as we possibly can. So that will be either later tonight or early tomorrow morning to try and give people as much certainty as possible. We'll hold further meetings of the Emergency Committee and also the State Disaster Council later this afternoon. We'll try and get as many figures or test results in as we can so we can provide further advice as soon as we can. I know it's very debilitating for many small businesses. I'm very, very, very sympathetic. And we want to provide certainty for them as soon as we possibly can.
How will you compensate those businesses that have had to shut down in this lockdown?
Well, we're currently considering what that will be, but we will look to provide some support. But look, you know, it's not going to be perfect. It won't be as much as people might want. And so we're looking at what can be done exactly as we did last time, back in March, April, May. What else we can do, and we expect to make further announcements on that as soon as we can.
What will you take to National Cabinet in terms of quarantine and changes that might need to be made to hotel quarantine in light of issues this week?
Well, obviously I'll advise National Cabinet, as indeed I suspect the Victorian Premier will, tomorrow about what has occurred in Western Australia and our learnings from it. Clearly, we made the case on a number of occasions, and you might recall about 3 or 4 months ago, I made the case that some Commonwealth facilities could be used to assist. Defence bases, Christmas Island, some of the defence bases are very close to Perth. They have existing quarantine facilities very close to hospitals, and they could assist. The Commonwealth could assist. But they elected not to back earlier this year, so the states had to pick it up. That's the historical fact. The reality is we've had 37,000 people go through our hotel quarantine system, and this is perhaps our first breach, our first infection of one of the staff members in there. I think what this shows is that the transmissibility of these strains of the virus is higher, and we obviously have to learn from that. I think what's happened in Melbourne, you recall they had some devastating experiences, the worst experiences in Australia for a long period of time. They've had a breach. We don't know yet whether or not the guard in question in Melbourne was wearing a mask, but there's every chance he may well have been. And so with the virus and the way it's now transmitting and how it's evolving, we obviously have to look at all of these issues. But Melbourne put in place a whole range of additional precautionary measures, and clearly there's still been a breach. So this is a dangerous situation, which is why we've taken the actions we've taken.
Why aren't you able to provide more clarity on the restrictions that will be lifted tomorrow at this point? I mean, was there not a plan for foreseeing this scenario to this point?
Yes, we put in place lots of plans. We've moved very quickly from Sunday through to now. Numerous numbers of initiatives we put in place in a very heated and very quick environment, whilst also dealing with one of the worst bushfires we've seen in many years. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been involved. It's been a very, very tense and exacting period for everyone involved. But we're still awaiting the latest test results. So we're still doing thousands of tests. And that's why we'll make further announcements once we get those test results in.
Surely this is, in terms of if there's an outbreak, this is probably a best case scenario at this stage, pending those test results tomorrow. I mean, surely that's a square one of preparation scenario of what happens, isn't it?
I don't understand your question.
If you're preparing a plan for this, and this is at this stage the best case scenario with only one case, I mean, surely that's a starting point for plans. So you haven't had a plan for if there's a best case scenario of a breakout?
Yeah, we do have a plan, and obviously there's a whole range of people working on it as we speak. I had a meeting early this morning, had a range of meetings yesterday about all of these issues, and obviously we're consulting Chief Health Officer, Police Commissioner, Health Minister, Director General of DPC and Public Sector Commissioner, and all of their officers about what measures will be the follow-up measures that we expect will come into effect at 6 p.m. tomorrow night, but we have to await the latest test results. So testing is ongoing. It's happening as we speak. There'll be thousands more tests conducted today. So you can't make any final announcements or decisions unless you get those results in.
Just back to the bushfires, if that's okay. In terms of donations, you've said that monetary donations are the best way to go. We know of people in country towns who are still collecting items that they hope to bring and drop off. Is that the right thing to do? What's your message to those people who are trying to help?
My message is to, if you can make a $20, $50, $100, $500, $1,000 donation to the Lord Mayor's Distress Fund, that's the best thing you can do. What the people involved need is money. They need assistance of that nature. So the state will be providing financial assistance to each of the individuals who have lost their homes or their homes have been damaged. We'll also be donating to the Lord Mayor's Distress Fund, and the Commonwealth Government will be doing something similar, certainly in terms of the disaster relief arrangements. I think the reason why, there's not, I think, and maybe I'll get Commissioner Clem to comment at the end, but the reason why donations of food or casseroles, as worthy as they are and as genuine and decent as people are, I think that accepting those, puts a degree of, how would you put it, trust, or Commissioner Clem might be here, degree of trust into the system, and we haven't verified where the food has come from, where the products have come from, how they've been made. We don't know those things. So I think there's actual rules around that. I might just get Commissioner Clem to comment on that.
Just for your info, it's mostly from the country areas, it's mostly clothing and items and things like that, as opposed to food that they're donating?
Yeah, so the best outcome for the people that have been affected in the fires is for money to be donated to the Lord Mayor's Distress Relief Fund. It is what often happens in these situations is that just the logistical effort around furniture, around clothes, around whatever it is that people want to donate. The quality of that is sometimes questionable. Is it something that people actually need? A lot of the time, things that are donated are not necessarily what people need, and so it ends up being something that you've got to manage. And so the best effect, the thing that's going to have the greatest net effect for those people that have been affected by this terrible event is money into that relief fund. so that the recovery effort can make sure it goes to the very heart of what those people need.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Is there likely to be any financial assistance for any businesses that have had to close because of the lockdown at all?
Yeah, I think I just answered a question on that. We're working on that, and we expect to have further announcements soon.
If there's no national approach to moving quarantine out of, metro cities, would you look at doing something separately? Given that, obviously being in the city, there's far greater risk of exposure.
No, I think this requires, if we were to do something whereby we remove quarantine from the city, it requires defence bases, it requires immigration facilities, it requires those sorts of things to be used. They often have security in place, they often have medical services there, they often have actually quite good hospitals in place. That's what it requires. But the Commonwealth has said they don't want to do it. Even though, as I said, a lot of their facilities are very close to the city and could be used. Christmas Island, for that matter, has been set up and has had thousands of people go through it, many of whom have been unwell. But the Commonwealth says they don't want to do it. So the state has picked up the load. I doubt the Commonwealth will want to change their mind. This is a difficult thing to manage. This takes a lot of effort on the part of a lot of people to manage these hotels. And it's obviously a high risk environment. Even when you put it in place, as Melbourne has, changed all their protocols, they've still had an infection breakout. So I expect the Commonwealth won't want to change that position, but obviously I'd welcome it if they did.
So, Premier, hopefully last question. Just wondering whether schools have been communicated that they'll definitely be going back on Monday, considering we've now had 4 days of no cases.
We expect schools will go back. Obviously depends upon whether or not there's any further infections. We expect to make a further announcement tonight or tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Just letting everyone know, obviously we'll start the tour of the fireground soon if everyone wants to start getting kitted up. If you don't have PPC, feel free to come and see myself or Mark.
So, should all we need to say here was just quickly explain to you